Rangers trade talks are escalating as Chris Drury's roster shakeup is not complete, and rumors revolving around the longest tenured New York Ranger are continuing to intensify. We also have some other reports and info regarding a contract extension that could be incoming. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest, but before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 74% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel, so if you want to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers, if you're a diehard New York Rangers fan and you're watching this, it's free. Hit that subscribe button. You get to stay up to date with everything going on with the team. Now, obviously, back in November, there was that memo put out by Chris Drury, which turned out to be a pretty bad idea for the morale of the team. But obviously, it was regarding Chris Kreider, that is. Chris Drury put it out, and Jacob Trouba, and that they would both be traded, or, they were being dangled out there on the trade wire and obviously on the trade block. So that obviously came to light, came to a head with Jacob Trouba, has not yet with Chris Kreider, and that could be coming to a head soon with a couple teams involved. And we have 6 potential landing spots for the New York Rangers star Chris Drury amidst NHL rumors. Now, this is from Joe. Things have changed as well since he wrote this, but I thought this was very interesting, and I'm only going to highlight a couple teams that I think could be interested in Chris Drury and could make sense for the New York Rangers as well, although he has 6 teams in his article, and one of them, and the first one, is the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, if you look at their deadline cap space, don't look at the current cap space, don't look at the projected cap space. Let's talk about the trade deadline, because at this point, the way the Rangers are playing, I'm thinking that something's only really going to go down around the trade deadline, because either you're in the playoffs and you're in a playoff spot, or you're not, and you're going to make your bed, you're going to make your decision at that point in time if you are Chris Drury. And say what you want about Chris Drury, whether you like him, whether you hate him, right? I think that's what the plan is right now, to make a decision at the trade deadline. If you're in a playoff spot, go for it in the playoffs. Not go for it in terms of buy at the deadline, but just, keep everyone together. Go for the playoffs. Obviously, the Rangers want playoff dates. They want games in that building in the playoffs. And if you're out of the playoffs, maybe sell off a bit and go for a big fish in free agency. I believe that's what the plan is right now. But again, if you look at their deadline cap space, they have $4.9 million in deadline cap space that they can add at the trade deadline. Chris Kreider makes $6.5 million. Vegas can absolutely make this work if they wanted to, sending salary back the other way. If you take a look at their lineup, there's a couple pieces. Listen, if you're the New York Rangers, I think if you're trading Chris Kreider, the way that the team is built right now, the fact that you still have Zibanejad, the fact that you still have Panarin, I think you need a younger guy who can play right now. Now, I don't know, besides maybe Holtz, if there's any guys on this team that kind of fit that mold, right? Maybe you would enjoy a guy like Hertl. That's a hefty cap spendings there if you get Thomas Hertl in return. I don't think the Vegas Golden Knights want to give up any center depth at this point in time. So I don't know if anyone off the roster really jumps out at me. But if you look at the defense, there is one player that does jump out at me, and that's Nicholas Hague. And yes, he is a depth defenseman, but he's a big body, a body that the Rangers could use in their lineup. So that could be a piece. I'm not saying trade Chris Kreider for Nick Hague. There would have to be some draft picks and maybe some other stuff in there. But I think Nick Hague could be an interesting prospect. If you really want to go for it, go for another, big name defenseman too, Hannafin. I mean, the Rangers can afford it at this point. If you really wanted to do something like that to really shake things up, I like Nick Hague. I think it could be a good depth option if you get other pieces. If you get draft picks for Chris Kreider, I think that would really shore up the defense and something more realistic. In terms of Vegas, I think it's an interesting idea, because if you look on Vegas' side as well, look at their left side, right? You got Chris Kreider playing there on the left side. Look at their left side. Barbashev was great. He is a great player. It gets really thin after that, right? You got Brett Howden down there on the third line. Victor Olofsson, not a great option for them. And Tanner Pearson there, right? So not great options on the left side. You would instantly improve tenfold if you added Chris Kreider to this lineup. So I think it's a very interesting idea. Obviously, you can play on the power play. The other thing I should mention, since we're this far into the video, is Chris Kreider, his back is not 100%. That's the other thing. So when making a trade like this, you have to keep in mind that teams might be saying, hey, we know his back is not right, and he's only going to be able to give us 70% of what he actually can in the playoffs. So you might have to think about that in terms of trade. You're not going to be able to get huge fish in return for Chris Kreider, probably some draft picks. I think a guy like Nick Hague would actually look really good on the New York Rangers. The other team that Joe mentioned, And they can absolutely afford this. Absolutely. I mean, they could afford it right now. They can make this trade tomorrow if they wanted to, is the Utah Hockey Club. Now, a lot of it has to do with some injury troubles and a couple guys out for the majority of the season. But at the trade deadline, they have $25 million in deadline cap space that they can add to their team at the trade deadline. So this is another very interesting option. Another team that when you look at the left side, beyond Keller, I mean, it is not great. I like McBain. I think he's a great option. Actually, could look pretty good on the Rangers. They could use more players like that to kind of mesh in with the skill. But again, I don't know how many third liners you want to add to the Rangers at this point. They just added Kaliev, and he's not doing too much, not making him look too smart at this point in time. But again, if you look at the defense, couple interesting options. I don't think they want to give up on a lot of guys like Marino, Kesselring, guys like that. You know, they're young pieces that they want to continue to develop with the team and see it out and hopefully make the playoffs one day. But there's a couple interesting options. This is a team as well that has a lot of really good prospect options, right? If you want to trade for that. So I think that's another option. But again, if you're the Rangers, I think you want a younger-ish player that can make an impact at the NHL level right now, that has played in the NHL. So there's a couple options here. Like if you want to get bigger and tougher, you can go after guys like McBain, Krause, guys like this, and then, get some draft picks in return as well. But I don't know if you want to go that way. I wonder if you go younger and a guy who can play in the NHL, maybe somebody who's, bordering the AHL right now that can make the NHL, or maybe a younger prospect. But it's an interesting idea, I think. But again, when you look at this lineup, Haig, if you were to trade for him from Vegas, this is a big body, like 6'7" on skates. Huge, could make an impact physically. He's won a Stanley Cup, and you can't tell me he's not an upgrade over Vakanainen right now, today, tomorrow. So I think it could be a very good option. He's probably an upgrade over Lindgren at this point. I love Lindgren, and I think he's put his body on the line for this team. It's probably time to move on from that player as well. He could be on the way out. So I think there's a real opportunity here to rejig the defense, maybe add another piece on offense while getting younger. And I think that's exactly what the Rangers have to do here and retool. I think they can even do it. This is the other underrated thing. I think they can even do this if they're in a playoff spot, if they're going to make the playoffs, because you bring in these new young guys, you go into the playoffs and see what happens. Because this year, I think all fans know it has not gone the way that we thought it was going to go, right? Like with Jacob Trouba leaving, that signaled to me like the season is probably lost at this point. So not that Jacob Trouba was going to be the difference maker and everything, but I think that was a signal that like, all right, we see the writing on the wall, right? So that was tough, but I think it's a very interesting option. The last thing I'll touch on in this video is Will Borgen. Is he playing himself into a contract extension? This is from Remy. I thought this was a very interesting article that basically, the Rangers have gotten some strong games out of Will Borgen. Another pending UFA this offseason came from the Kraken, obviously in the Capo Caco trade. And he would be a decent option to extend beyond this season if he's willing to take third pair minutes in 2025-26. And Arthur Staple of The Athletic said that too seems unlikely. So Borgen is another possible trade piece before the March 7th deadline. And when they traded for Will Borgen, a lot of people were calling me a little bit crazy in the comments. They're not going to trade him. I was saying exactly that when they traded for him. Hey, this is a piece that they could actually flip at the deadline, and then if they like him so much, they could re-sign him in the offseason if they really wanted to. And I was called a little bit crazy, and maybe, this is just a piece that they're just going to hold on to and probably sign him to a ridiculous contract. I think it's actually a real possibility they could flip him at the deadline as well. But we'll see. I think they have a real opportunity to rejig the blue line here, and not just that, trade off Chris Kreider. Is that going to be a move that fans are going to be happy about? No. Is that even the right move? I'm not sure. It doesn't make you better immediately. There's no way, right? It could. There is a world where it does. But I think it's something that you have to start looking at. Some of these older players, it's something that, you got to start getting younger if you're the Rangers, because the writing is on the wall. But let me know what you think in the comments of a potential Chris Kreider trade, and let me know what you think about Will Borgen possibly being extended or being used as a trade chip at the trade deadline and they flip him. I think that's another interesting proposition as well. Let me know what you think, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.